Have you ever stood under fluorescent lights and realized your entire life was an elaborate lie? I did. I was stuck between my mother's fake groans over a bee sting and the sight of my husband, the man I trusted for 12 years, holding a newborn that wasn't ours. In that moment, I felt no pain. I felt clarity, a cold, surgical clarity. I knew I wouldn't cry. I would plan. My name is Eliza Vance. I'm 38 years old, and my job as the senior archivist at the Crestwood Historical Institute is to find the truth in things that have turned to dust. I piece together forgotten lives from letters, ledgers, and faded photographs. I am, by nature, a person who connects the dots. That night, the only dots I was connecting were the ones on the ceiling of the Monmouth Regional Hospital emergency room. I had rushed my mother, Beatrice, here after another one of her episodes. Beatrice, at 65, is a retired stage actress who believes the world is her audience. Tonight's performance was a dramatic, gasping asthma attack, allegedly brought on by the audacity of her new neighbor wearing a perfume Beatrice found pedestrian. So there I was, under the humming fluorescent lights, one hand rubbing my temple, the other holding my mother's hand as she took shallow, theatrical breaths. The air smelled of bleach and burnt coffee. I was halfway through a mental draft of an email about a Civil War manuscript when I looked up, and the world stopped. Through the double doors leading to the maternity ward, he walked out. My husband, Julian Vance. Julian, 40 years old, a senior management consultant at Apex Solutions Consulting. Julian, who was supposed to be 200 miles away in Stamford, Connecticut, handling an urgent corporate project that couldn't wait. He had been there since Monday. It was Wednesday. He wasn't in his usual sharp suit. He was wearing jeans and a soft Henley I hadn't seen before. He looked exhausted. His hair was messy, but he was glowing. It was a word I hadn't used for him in years. He was radiant. In his arms, he carried a massive bouquet of pink peonies and a pale pink teddy bear, the soft, expensive kind. My breath didn't just catch, it evaporated. My lungs felt vacuum-sealed. This was not possible. This was a hallucination brought on by stress and the smell of antiseptic. Julian was in Stamford. He had called me just last night, his voice distant and crackling with bad reception, complaining about the hotel's room service. I stared, frozen, my body locked in the cheap plastic waiting room chair. He hadn't seen me. He was focused on the exit, a small, tired smile on his face. The duty nurse at the desk, a young woman with a kind face, followed my gaze. She smiled at me, assuming I was just another visitor admiring a new father. "Such a happy family, the Vances," she said, her voice bright. "The baby just arrived this morning." The Vances. Not a Vance. The Vances, plural. A recognized unit. My blood didn't run cold. It turned to ice, to solid state. The sound in the room warped, the beeping monitors and the low hum of the vending machine fading into a dull roar. Then, beside me, Beatrice, who seconds before had been clutching her chest in respiratory distress, sat up slightly, her eyes, suddenly sharp as glass, narrowed. "Isn't that the silver tie clip you gave him for your 10th anniversary? Eliza." Her voice was a perfectly projected stage whisper, cutting through my shock. I looked. It was tucked into the collar of his Henley, glinting under the harsh hospital light, was the antique clip I had spent 6 months hunting down. I didn't answer her. The archivist took over. The part of me that documents, that preserves, that builds a case. My hand moved with a steadiness that felt alien. I lifted my phone, angled it slightly, and tapped the screen. The shutter's click was silent, but in my head, it was a gavel strike. One perfect, damning photograph. Julian Vance, radiant, holding flowers for a baby that was not ours, wearing the gift I gave him to celebrate a decade of lies. I lowered the phone and tucked it back into my purse. I turned to my mother. The panic was gone, replaced by something cold and hard and clear. "This hospital isn't good enough," I said, my voice perfectly even. "I'm taking you to a private clinic." Beatrice stared at me, her fake wheezing forgotten. She saw the look on my face. She didn't argue. I stood and pulled her by the arm, yanking her out of the chair. I didn't look back. I walked us out of that emergency room, past the triage desk, and into the cool night air, dragging my mother behind me before Julian Vance could turn his head, before he could see the wife he thought was at home, and the life he thought he could keep hidden. I drove. My hands were steady on the wheel, my knuckles white. The digital clock on the dashboard read 9:14 p.m. Beside me, Beatrice had already launched into a full-scale critique of Monmouth Regional's triage system. "Utterly incompetent," she declared, fanning herself with a crumpled pamphlet. "The lighting was positively ghoulish, and that nurse at the desk had the bedside manner of a toll booth operator. Did you see the way she was looking at us? And my breathing? I could have expired right there." I said nothing. I just drove. I took her to a 24-hour private clinic across town, a place with plush carpets and complimentary bottled water. Dr. Evans, a man well acquainted with my mother's dramatic constitution, saw her immediately. 15 minutes later, he emerged, patting my arm. "She's perfectly fine, Eliza. Lungs clear as a bell. We gave her a mild antihistamine for her nerves." I paid the bill, collected my mother, and we were back in the car. The silence was thick, broken only by Beatrice's continued complaints about the inferior service at the first hospital. I didn't hear her. My mind was no longer a place of shock. It was an archive. It was my workspace. I was pulling files, cross-referencing data. File 1, the Stanford Project. It had started suddenly, about 18 months ago. Before that, Julian's travel was sporadic: Chicago for a day, Dallas for 2. But Stanford had become a fixture, a recurring, demanding client, at least 2 or 3 trips a month, sometimes for a week at a time. 18 months. I did the math. The perfect gestation period and then some. File 2, the phone calls, the late-night client emergencies. He used to take them in the study. For the last year, maybe more. He always took them outside. He would pace the patio, his voice a low, urgent murmur I could just barely see, but not hear, through the glass. If I walked toward the door, he would abruptly end the call. "Sorry, conference call," he'd say. "You know how it is?" I, like an idiot, had accepted it as the new, annoying normal of his high-pressure job. File 3, digital security. Julian and I used to have an open-door policy with our electronics. Then, about a year ago, new passwords appeared on everything. His laptop, his phone. "New company policy," he'd explained. "Cybersecurity audit. We all have to lock down. You understand?" I understood. I am a professional who handles delicate, priceless documents. I understood the need for security. I gripped the steering wheel. The pieces weren't just falling into place. They were slamming together like magnets. The exhaustion I had mistaken for overwork. The credit card bill I'd queried last month, the one with a recurring charge from a Stanford service provider he'd dismissed as a software subscription. The way he hadn't really looked at me, not really looked at me, in months. I, Eliza Vance, who could spot a forged signature on a 19th century land grant from 10 feet away, had been living with a forgery for years, my entire marriage. The realization of my own stupidity was a cold, sharp blade. I wasn't a wife. I was a poorly maintained archive, a collection of facts he'd stopped bothering to update or even consult. I pulled into my mother's driveway and cut the engine. The sudden silence was absolute. I did not cry. Crying is what happens when you feel loss. I felt nothing but a cold, profound sense of purpose. There would be no screaming matches, no tearful demands for an explanation. Confrontation was messy, emotional, and unpredictable. It gave the guilty party a chance to lie, to gaslight, to play the victim. I dealt in facts. I dealt in evidence. Julian wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a fraudulent document, and you don't cry at a fraudulent document. You expose it. You label it. You put it on display for everyone to see exactly what it is. I would not mourn. I would retaliate. I walked Beatrice to her door. She was still rambling about her palpitations. "Rest, Mother," I said, my voice flat. "Drink some water." She stopped, her hand on the doorknob, and turned to look at me under the porch light. Her usual dramatic flair was gone. She was just looking at me, her head tilted. "You have that look," she said quietly. "What look?" "That look. The one you get when you're in the vaults at the Institute. The one you got when you discovered great-grandfather's war diary was a complete forgery written by his second wife." She peered at me. "Are you hunting?" "Eliza." I looked directly into her eyes. The image of Julian holding those pink peonies flashed in my mind. The nurse's cheerful voice. The Vances. A happy family. "I'm preparing an exhibition. Mother," I said. "And it's going to be magnificent." I drove back to the house we shared. The driveway was empty. Julian was still at the hospital, playing the devoted new father. Good. The garage door rumbled shut behind me, sealing me inside the curated lie of our home. I didn't turn on the main lights. I walked through the dark foyer, past the wedding photo on the mantel, and went straight to his office. The room smelled like hymn cedar and old books. I sat in his expensive leather chair and turned on his desktop computer. I didn't need his password for this. I started with the basics, our joint accounts. I, the meticulous archivist, managed our finances. I pulled up the last 6 months of statements. I searched for Stamford. And there it was. A recurring monthly charge. $3,200. Not to a hotel chain, but to Stamford Gables Luxury Rentals. A name that mundane, that domestic screamed apartment. This was just the public record. I needed the private archive. I knew he had a separate credit card. He'd claimed it was just for business expenses to keep the accounting clean. I'd seen the Amex logo on the card in his wallet. I went to the login page. Forgot password. Security question. What was the name of your first pet? A cold smile touched my lips. Julian loved to tell the story of Buster, the golden retriever he'd had as a kid. He'd tell it at dinner parties, his eyes misty, about how Buster had been tragically hit by a car when Julian was 12. A defining, sad moment. Years ago. I'd been archiving old town records from his hometown for the Institute. I'd found a shelter adoption ledger. There it was, Buster, a golden retriever, adopted by the Vance family. And 2 years later, Buster, surrendered by the same family. Reason behavioral issues. He hadn't lost his dog to tragedy. He'd abandoned it when it became inconvenient. I typed BUSTER. Access granted. I opened the statements. It was like unearthing a buried civilization. This wasn't just an affair. It was a complete, funded, parallel life. The charges told the whole story. Weekly payments to a flower delivery service in Stamford. Dozens of charges at Stamford Nest, a high-end baby boutique. I clicked the link. Strollers, cribs, designer diaper bags. There were recurring co-payments to a Stamford pediatric clinic. And the most recent charge, just yesterday, Monmouth Regional Hospital, maternity services, paid in full. He hadn't just been visiting Stamford. He lived there. He was building a new family on the foundation of my money and my trust. The bank statements were the skeleton. I needed the connective tissue. I picked up my phone. I knew exactly who to call. Julian's administrative assistant, Marcus. Julian treated Marcus like furniture, routinely taking credit for his work, his proposals, his data analysis. I, on the other hand, had always made a point to ask Marcus about his weekend. I sent him a gift card for his birthday every April. I knew he couldn't stand Julian. He picked up on the second ring, his voice professional. Apex Solutions, Marcus speaking. Marcus, hi, it's Eliza Vance. His tone warmed immediately. Eliza, how are you? Everything okay? I manufactured the perfect, breezy, wifely voice. I'm great. Listen, I know this is last minute, but I'm trying to plan a huge surprise party for Julian. He's up for that Partner of the Year award next week, and I want to do something big. That's so nice of you, Eliza, Marcus said. I know, but he's impossible to pin down. He's still in Stamford on that emergency project. Is he really going to be back in time? I'm trying to book a venue. I held my breath. There was a pause. Not a long one, but a heavy one. Eliza, Marcus said, and his voice dropped, losing all its professional warmth. What project in Stamford? The Apex client. The big one he's been managing for 18 months. Another pause. Eliza, he said. Apex hasn't had a client in Stamford for 2 years. We closed that portfolio when the regional bank was acquired. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice light. What? That's impossible. He's there right now. He travels there 3 times a month. I know he does, Marcus said, his voice clipped and angry. I'm the one who processes his travel reports. He files them under General Business Development. It's a slush fund code. I've flagged it to accounting twice, but he's senior, so they rubber stamp it. 2 years, not 18 months. 2 years. Marcus, I said. What else? He hesitated. He's my boss, Eliza. I shouldn't. You're right, I said. Forget I called. The party was a silly idea. I made to hang up. Wait, Marcus said. To hell with him. He stole my data model for this Partner of the Year submission. You've always been good to me. What is it, Marcus? He had me book a flight this afternoon. A personal request on his secret card. My blood froze again, this time for a different reason. A flight. Yes, a one-way ticket to São Paulo, Brazil. It departs next Saturday, the day after the gala. I hung up the phone. The pieces clicked into their final horrifying place. This wasn't just adultery. This wasn't just a secret family. This was an exit strategy. He was going to accept his award, this Partner of the Year honor that Marcus said he'd stolen, and then he was going to vanish. He was going to flee the country, leaving me with the joint accounts, the mortgage, and the wreckage of a life, while he started a new one in Brazil with his new family. He wasn't just a liar. He was a fugitive in the making. I set the phone down on the desk. My hand wasn't shaking. It was perfectly still. Brazil. A one-way ticket to São Paulo. He wasn't just building a new life. He was dismantling our old one, piece by piece, and planning to flee with the assets. He was going to wait until after the gala, after he'd secured his fraudulent award, and then he was going to disappear, leaving me to field calls from creditors and wonder what happened. The study door creaked open. I hadn't even heard her car in the driveway. Beatrice stood in the doorway, her purse gone, her frail act completely vanished. She looked, for the first time in years, completely clear. I let myself in, she said. Her voice was steady, devoid of any theatrical quiver. She walked into the room, past the shelves of my historical archives, and stopped at Julian's desk. She was holding something in her hand, a delicate platinum chain, glittering with dozens of small, brilliant-cut diamonds. I found this in the pocket of his golf jacket last week, she said. She held it up, letting it dangle under the green desk lamp. It was flashy, thin, and impossibly small. I'm guessing it isn't your size, darling, and it certainly isn't your taste. That was the final piece. The bracelet, the baby, the peonies, the radiant smile, the Vances, the 2 years of lies, the one-way ticket to Brazil, the cold, archival calm that had protected me since I walked out of the hospital shattered into a million pieces. A sound tore from my throat, a sharp gasp that was half a sob. It was the first moment of weakness, the first crack in the ice. He has a baby, I whispered, the words feeling foreign and toxic on my tongue. And once that first truth was out, the rest followed, tumbling out of me in a raw, unfiltered torrent. He has a whole other family in Stamford, a baby, the nurse. She said, the Vances. He's been lying for 2 years. Mother, not 18 months, 2 years. Apex hasn't had a client there. It was all fake, and he's running. He's running away. He booked a one-way flight to Brazil for the day after the gala. I finally finished, breathless, my chest aching. I waited for the requisite maternal hysterics, the wailing, the hand-wringing, the demand for a stiff drink. Beatrice did none of those things. She did not gasp. She did not look surprised. She simply closed her eyes for one long second, and when she opened them, the look on her face was one of profound, bone-deep relief. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, her shoulders slumping. "I honestly thought I was going crazy." I stared at her, baffled. "What, Mother? Did you hear what I said? I heard you, darling," she said, cutting me off. She sat down in the leather chair opposite me and tossed the diamond bracelet onto Julian's desk blotter, where it lay sparkling like a coiled snake. "He's a filthy, narcissistic rat. I've known it for 6 months." The room tilted. You knew. I knew," she repeated, her voice laced with steel. 6 months ago, I was at the Galleria, the big one, out by the highway. I was in the parking garage, level C, looking for my car, and I saw him. His car. He was in it, and he was kissing a woman. Not a friendly kiss. Eliza. A real, Broadway, dip-and-hold kiss. She was young, maybe 30, and very, very pregnant. I couldn't breathe. "And you didn't tell me you let me live this lie for 6 more months." Beatrice let out a sharp, unamused laugh. "Tell my daughter, the logician, the woman who won't believe a rumor unless it's been notarized and cited in triplicate darling. Please, I know who you are. You would have accused me of being a dramatic, meddling mother-in-law. You would have confronted him. He would have denied it. He would have called me senile. He would have painted me as the villain, driven a wedge between us, and then he would have simply gotten better at hiding it. No." She leaned forward, her eyes, so often clouded with manufactured drama, now intensely sharp. "I know my daughter. You don't respond to hearsay. You respond to evidence. You live for the primary source. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that you would never, ever believe me unless you saw it with your own 2 eyes. A sudden, horrifying cold washed over me as I connected the dots. The bee sting last week, the vertigo at the mall 2 weeks before that, the heart palpitations last month, the asthma attack tonight. All performances," she confirmed, waving a dismissive hand, a hint of pride in her voice. "And rather good ones, if I do say so myself. I had to break your routine. Eliza, you're always at the Institute, buried in those dusty books. I had to get you out. I was trying to get you to the mall, to the hospital, anywhere I thought you might, by some chance, finally run into him. Tonight was just spectacularly lucky." I looked at my mother, the woman I had spent my entire adult life resenting, dismissing as selfish and shallow, a creature of pure ego. She wasn't. She was a goddamned strategist. She had seen the enemy, analyzed her target me, and formulated a long-term, high-risk plan to deploy the truth in the only way I would ever accept it. She had been on my side, in the trenches, for half a year. I had mistaken her reconnaissance for histrionics. I saw her, really saw her, for the first time. She was an ally. The last of my grief evaporated, replaced by that cold, hard, beautiful clarity. But it wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. Beatrice stood up. She smoothed her skirt, the actress returning. But this time she wasn't playing a frail victim. She was playing the lead. "All right," she said, her voice crisp and full of energy. "This dreadful little domestic play needs a second act. It needs a climax. And I, for one, expect a standing ovation. She looked at me, a sharp, brilliant smile spreading across her face. What's the plan, Director? The next morning, Julian came home. He walked in around 10 a.m., looking rumpled and tired, but still carrying that glow. He had the decency to look slightly guilty. "Eliza, thank God," he said, dropping his bag. "Stamford was a nightmare. The deal almost fell apart. I was in the boardroom for 48 hours straight. I'm completely wiped." I just looked at him. I pictured him in the maternity ward, holding those peonies. I pictured him booking a one-way flight to Brazil. I adjusted the collar on my silk blouse. "That sounds exhausting, Julian," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "You should get some rest. I, unfortunately, have to run out. A potential new donor for the Institute wants to meet. He's based in Stamford, coincidentally. He's thinking of funding a new wing." He didn't even blink. "Stamford. What a hellhole. Well, good luck. Secure that bag." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and headed upstairs. The kiss felt like a spider web, cold and dry. I got in my car and drove. I had the address from the rental company statement, Stamford Gables Luxury Rentals. It took me 2 hours to get there. 2 hours of cold, methodical breathing. It wasn't a sleek high-rise. It was one of those new, sprawling communities, designed to look like a friendly, upscale town. I found the building and the apartment number, 312. I stood outside the door. I could hear a baby fussing inside. I thought about the lie I had just told Julian. It had been so easy, frighteningly easy. I knocked. The fussy noise stopped. A moment later, the door opened. A woman, young, probably in her late 20s, stood there. She was pretty, with dark, tired eyes and hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing sweatpants and a nursing top, and she was holding him, the baby, wrapped in a pale pink blanket. She looked at me with the wary, exhausted expression of a new mother interrupted. "Can I help you?" I didn't plan what I was going to say. I just said the facts. "I am Eliza Vance, Julian's wife." I expected tears. I expected the door to slam. I expected a stammered apology. I got none of those. Her face, which had been soft with fatigue, hardened instantly. The look in her eyes wasn't shame. It was pure, unadulterated anger. "You'd better come in," she said, her voice tight. She stepped back, and I walked into their life. The apartment was beautiful, tastefully decorated in soft grays and blues. All the furniture was new. On the kitchen counter, I saw the bouquet of pink peonies from the hospital sitting in a glass vase. The pale pink teddy bear was on a shelf in the nursery, which I could see through an open door. This was not a secret crash pad. This was a home. She closed the door behind me and turned. The baby, a tiny, perfect little girl, started to fuss again. The woman's name was Chloe Sanders, 29 years old. I knew that from the pediatric clinic bills. "He's asleep upstairs," she said, her voice sharp. "He just got in an hour ago. He said he had to go to the office to file a report." "Was he with you?" "He just got home to our house," I said. "He told me he was in a 48-hour board meeting." Chloe just stared at me, her expression unreadable. She walked over to the sofa and sat, adjusting the baby, who she identified as Lily. "He told me you were dead," she said. The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. "What?" "He told me his wife, Eliza, died 2 years ago." Chloe's voice was brittle, cracking with a fury that was just starting to find its footing. "A car accident. He said he was still so broken up about it. He said that's why he was so damaged, so hesitant to commit at first. He said he was still grieving." I sat down in the armchair opposite her, the chair I had probably paid for. 2 years, I repeated. The same amount of time Marcus had said Apex had no clients in Stamford. This wasn't a desperate affair. This was a calculated long-term plan. Chloe continued, the words spilling out now. "He was so convincing. He cried. He showed me pictures of you, of your wedding. He told me how brilliant you were, how you worked at a museum, an archivist. He said he couldn't bear to even go to your grave alone. My grave, I whispered. He took me, Chloe said, her eyes flashing. About a year ago, to a cemetery in North Salem. He stood there and he talked to the headstone. He told you that he was finally learning to love again, and he hoped you would approve of me. I knew that cemetery. I knew that grave. Elizabeth Ann Shaw, I said. Chloe's head snapped up. Yes. How did you know? My great-aunt, I said, my voice hollow. She died in 1980. Julian and I. We went to her funeral when his uncle, her last living relative, passed away. He knew she had my name. Chloe looked down at the baby in her arms, her face crumbling. Oh my God. She was a nurse, a maternity nurse. I realized it from the scrubs hanging on a hook by the door. She spent her life helping people, and she had been taken in by the most pathological liar I had ever encountered. He said he couldn't marry me, Chloe said, her voice thick. Not yet. He said you, the dead you, had come from a wealthy family and that your family, my in-laws, had frozen his assets after your death. He said he was in a legal battle to get his inheritance back so he could provide for me and Lily. He said that's why all his trips to the city were to meet with lawyers. I just looked at her. She wasn't my rival. She wasn't the other woman. She was just me, but with a baby. She was victim number 2. We stared at each other across the beautifully decorated living room, 2 women who had believed 2 completely different, intricate, and devastating lies, both spun by the same man. And we both knew, in that chilling, silent moment, that we were the only 2 people on earth who knew the truth. I opened my purse. The archivist in me had come prepared. I pulled out my wallet and extracted a photograph I always kept, not a digital one, but a physical print from a photo booth, taken 5 years ago. Julian and I, laughing, his arms around me, my wedding ring clearly visible. I laid it on the coffee table. This was our 15th anniversary trip, I said. We are very much married, and I am very much alive. Chloe stared at the photo, her hand covering her mouth. Then I pulled out my phone. I opened the email from Marcus. And this, I said, is a one-way flight confirmation to São Paulo, Brazil, for 1 passenger, Julian Vance. It departs this coming Saturday, the day after his company's big awards, gala. I turned the phone so she could see. She read it. She read it again. That's when she broke. But it wasn't the weeping I'd expected. It was a dry, gasping, furious sob. She clutched her daughter, Lily, closer, her body shaking. Not because he's leaving me, she choked out, but because he was leaving her. He used my savings, she whispered, her voice raw with a new kind of betrayal. He took everything I had, over $30,000. He said he needed it to set up a secure trust fund for Lily, something his vicious in-laws couldn't touch. He said it was the only way to protect her future. She got up, placed Lily gently in the bassinet, and walked to a desk in the corner. She came back with a sheaf of official-looking documents. He had me sign these. The Lily Sanders Vance Trust. It all looked so real. I took the papers from her shaking hands. I am a professional document handler. I've examined forgeries from 3 different centuries. This one was good, but it was sloppy. The letterhead was high quality, but the font spacing was inconsistent. The signature from the estate lawyer was digitally printed, not signed in ink, and the account information, it wasn't a trust. It was a simple wire transfer routing number to a bank in the Cayman Islands. This is fake, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet. This isn't a trust. It's a direct deposit form for an offshore account. He didn't invest your money. He stole it. He was liquidating his assets, and he took yours, too. He was funding his escape. Chloe's face, which had been pale with grief, turned a deep, mottled red. The nurse, the caregiver, vanished. In her place was a woman who had just seen her child's future stolen. "He is not getting away with this," she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous octave. I nodded. "He won't. His company is holding their annual Partner of the Year gala this Friday. He's the guest of honor. He's winning the grand prize. My original plan was to simply be there, to stand up during his acceptance speech, to introduce myself as the wife he claimed was dead. I thought it was a brilliant plan. Simple, public, devastating humiliation." Chloe shook her head slowly. No, that's not enough," she said, her eyes fixed on the forged documents in my hand. "That's just embarrassment. That's a scene. He'll call you crazy. He'll say you're a bitter ex-wife lying for money. People will forget about it in a week. He'll still have the award, he'll still have his reputation with his colleagues, and he'll still find a way to get on that plane. Humiliation isn't enough. He has to pay. For both of us. And for Lily." She looked up at me, and her eyes were not those of a victim. They were the eyes of an executioner. "You think he's just a liar in his personal life. He's a fraud in every part of it." I waited. "He brags," Chloe said, a bitter smile twisting her lips. "After a few glasses of wine, he loves to tell me how smart he is, how he runs circles around everyone at Apex. He didn't earn this award, Eliza. He stole it." My archival instincts tingled. This was the missing piece. "What do you mean, he stole it?" "He told me he borrowed the core data model from some junior associate. A Marcus." "Marcus," I breathed. "Yes. And he said the client satisfaction scores he submitted were fudged." His words. He said he faked the data from 2 major accounts to make his numbers look historic. He told me, "In this business, darling, you don't get rewarded for being honest. You get rewarded for being bold." A new plan began to form in my mind. A much bigger, much more permanent plan. This was no longer a domestic drama. This was corporate fraud. This was wire fraud. This was theft. He hadn't just built his new life on a lie. He'd built his entire career on one. My small personal exhibition was about to become a major public prosecution. I looked at Chloe. The alliance was sealed. "The gala is on Friday," I said. "We have 72 hours. So, I left Chloe's apartment with a hard drive full of her evidence and a strategic alliance that felt stronger than my marriage ever had. When I got home, Julian was asleep, recovering from his 48-hour ordeal. I went into my own office, not his, mine. My sanctuary, the place where I restored priceless manuscripts. Now, I was going to use it to dismantle a fraudulent life. My desk became a command center. My first call was to Marcus. "Eliza, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice low. "Marcus," I said, my voice crisp and clear. "You mentioned Julian stole your data model for this award, and Chloe, the other woman, told me he bragged about fudging client data." Marcus was silent for a second. He told her that the nerve. "Yes, it's true. I have the original data models. I have the real client satisfaction reports. He took my work, and the work of 2 guys in the Chicago office, combined it, and passed it off as his own groundbreaking analysis." "I need it," I said. "I need everything you have, the originals, the time-stamped files, the emails where you submitted them to him. Everything that proves his Partner of the Year submission is a complete fabrication." "Eliza, that's my job," he said. "Marcus, he's planning to flee the country with a stolen identity and a pocket full of cash, leaving me and at least one other woman to clean up his mess. He's not just a bad boss. He's a criminal." "Send me a secure email address," Marcus said, his voice hard. "You'll have everything in 10 minutes." The files arrived. It was beautiful, a perfect, pristine archive of his fraud. The original files from Marcus, dated. The original files from the Chicago colleagues, dated. And then Julian's final presentation, a clear case of digital plagiarism and data manipulation. This was the corporate nail in his coffin. Now, for the personal one. I went to the living room. Beatrice was waiting for me. I had called her on the drive back. "Mother," I said, "I need an opening night performance. I need you to be the most demanding, frail, and terrified mother-in-law in history. I need you to get Julian out of this house tonight." Beatrice smiled. It was a predator's smile. She took out her phone and dialed. I heard Julian's groggy voice answer upstairs. "Julian, darling." Beatrice's voice cracked, a perfect watery sob. "Oh, Julian, I'm so glad I reached you. I can't be alone tonight. That awful asthma attack, it's left me so weak. I'm seeing spots. I'm just so frightened, and Eliza is so busy with her work." She took a gasping breath. Could you possibly be a dear and just take your poor mother-in-law to dinner? Just somewhere quiet? I can't bear to be alone." I heard his muffled, annoyed sigh even from downstairs, but he couldn't refuse. Not the week of his big award. Not when he needed to appear to be the perfect family man. "Of course, Beatrice," he said, his voice heavy with false sincerity. "I'll be there in an hour." Beatrice hung up and winked at me. "He'll be gone for at least 2 hours. I'll insist on the filet mignon at the Palm. And dessert. Maybe 2. An hour later, I watched from the window as he led my mother, who was leaning on him like a Victorian invalid, to his car. The moment the car was out of the driveway, I was in his office, his laptop, his personal one, the one with the new password. But I had the password now. Buster. I plugged in a high-speed external hard drive and began a full clone of his entire system. As the data transferred, byte by byte, I worked on the other evidence. Chloe had emailed me a zip file. It contained every text message, every "I miss you," my deceased wife sentiment, every fake promise, and, most importantly, the high-resolution scans of the fraudulent Lily Sanders Vance Trust documents. The drive clone finished. I now had his entire digital life. His emails, his hidden bank statements, his browser history, his secret spreadsheets. I had it all. But the trust documents, they bothered me. They were fake, but they were functionally real. They were the mechanism he had used to steal $30,000. This wasn't just a moral failing. This was a crime. As an archivist, the Institute and I worked with a man named Dr. Eris Thorne. He wasn't just an appraiser. He was a forensic auditor, a man who specialized in authenticating and debunking high-value historical financial documents. He could spot a fake ledger from a mile away. He also did consulting for the FBI on white-collar crime. I sent him an email with a very vague subject line, "Consultation on Modern Documents." I attached Chloe's scans of the trust and the wire transfer confirmation to the Cayman Islands Bank. My phone rang not 30 minutes later. It wasn't Eris's usual academic tone. He sounded different. "Eliza," he said, his voice sharp. No pleasantries. "Where did you get these? A friend is going through a bad separation." I lied. "She thinks her husband is hiding assets." Eris was silent. "Eliza," he said, "I'm going to advise you as a friend and not as a consultant. Tell your friend to get a lawyer, and then tell her to get federal protection. This isn't just hiding assets. The routing number on this transfer. This isn't just some personal account. This is a known money laundering node. The documents are forged to look like a trust, but this entire setup is a classic front for wire fraud." He paused, and I heard him typing. "This isn't just a domestic issue. Eliza, what you just sent me is evidence of multiple federal-level felonies. This is not just personal deception. This is big league. This is serious prison time." The Beacon Grand Hotel was offensively opulent. The ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers and forced laughter, shimmering with what must have been $1 million in jewelry. This was Julian's world. This was the pinnacle. And tonight, he was its king. He was magnificent in his element. He moved through the crowd of CEOs and senior partners with an easy, practiced charm, one hand firmly on the small of my back. He was glowing, just as he had been in the hospital, but this was a different light. This was the hot, sharp glow of pure ego. "There he is," he'd say, grabbing the arm of some managing director. "Julian Vance. And this is my brilliant wife, Eliza." I played the part I had played for 15 years. I was the supportive, intelligent, slightly understated wife. Tonight, however, I was not understated. I was wearing an emerald green silk gown that clung to every curve, a dress I had bought 2 years ago and never had the nerve to wear, a dress Julian's eyes devoured when I came down the stairs. I smiled. I nodded. I let him hold my hand. I was the perfect accessory. "Eliza, you look absolutely breathtaking," he had whispered in the car. "My good luck charm. Only the best for the partner of the year," I'd replied, smiling. My mother was there, too. She had made a grand entrance, draped in a vintage silver gown, looking every bit the retired stage legend. When the CEO of Apex, a man named Harrison, had come to our table to personally greet Julian, Beatrice had clasped his hand. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Beatrice, Eliza's mother," she'd trilled. "I'm here as my daughter's chaperone. I simply would not miss this big, big moment for our family. We are just so proud of our Julian." Julian had beamed, soaking it in. "She adores me," he whispered to me, squeezing my hand. "How could she not?" I'd whispered back. I scanned the room. In the back, on a raised platform, was the audio-visual booth. I saw him. Marcus. He was dressed in the hotel technician's uniform, a black polo shirt and slacks. He was supervising the presentation. As if on cue, he looked up, caught my eye from across the ballroom, and gave me one. Slow, deliberate wink. I gave him the smallest possible nod. All pieces were in place. The dinner was almost over. The servers were clearing the dessert plates. The CEO was scheduled to begin the awards presentation in 10 minutes. It was time. I picked up my flute of champagne. "Darling," I said to Julian, "I'm just going to freshen up before the speeches." "Don't be long," he said, patting my hand, his eyes already on the stage. I stood and made my way, not toward the restroom, but toward table 3, the executive table. I saw my target, Robert McCain, the chief financial officer of Apex Solutions, a man with a reputation for being a ruthless, number-obsessed shark, a man who, according to Marcus, loathed Julian for his sloppy expense reports, but couldn't argue with his results. I walked behind him. Just as I passed, I stumbled, a tiny, believable lurch of my heel. "Oh!" I yelped, and the entire contents of my champagne flute went cascading down the back of his $2,000 tuxedo jacket. "Oh my goodness!" I gasped. "Mr. McCain, I am so dreadfully sorry." He shot up from his chair, sputtering, cold champagne dripping onto his seat. "What the? I'm so clumsy. My heel," I said, my voice frantic. I grabbed a cloth napkin from the table. "Please, let me help you." "Oh, this is just terrible. Let me dab that off. It's soaked." I bustled around him, dabbing at his shoulders, creating a perfect private sphere of flustered apology. He was annoyed, swatting at his back. "It's fine. Mrs. Vance, it's fine." I leaned in close, my mouth near his ear, still dabbing frantically. Under the cover of my apology, I whispered, "My husband is a very impressive man. Mr. McCain. He's even more impressive when you look at his private accounts. Specifically, the ones in the Cayman Islands, the ones he's been funding with laundered corporate money." He froze. His entire body went rigid under my hand. I kept dabbing. "I think he's been fudging more than his client satisfaction scores. I think he's been fudging his expense reports and skimming from client billing." I pulled back, my face a mask of mortified concern. "Oh, This is just ruined. I feel awful. As I pulled my hand away, I pressed a tiny black USB drive into his palm, closing his fingers around it. Here, I whispered, my voice changing, losing all its panic, becoming cold and precise. This is the evidence, the real data, the wire fraud, the fake trust, the offshore accounts. Everything. Your partner of the year is a federal criminal who is planning to flee to Brazil tomorrow. I stepped back, my eyes wide with fake horror. I don't know what to say. I'm ruined. Your jacket. McCain didn't look at his jacket. He looked at me, his shark eyes suddenly laser-focused. He saw I wasn't a clumsy wife. He saw exactly what I was. He looked down at his closed fist, at the tiny drive I had pressed into it. Without a word, he turned. He didn't go to the restroom. He walked, with a calm, deliberate, and terrifying urgency, straight out of the ballroom, his phone already in his hand. I watched him go. Then I turned, picked up a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray, and walked back to my table, a perfect, supportive smile fixed on my face. "Everything all right, darling?" Julian asked, not really looking at me. "Perfectly fine," I said, taking his hand. Just powdering my nose. I wouldn't want to miss a second of this. The ballroom lights dimmed. A single brilliant spotlight hit the podium. Harrison, the CEO, strode onto the stage, his voice booming with practiced enthusiasm. "Good evening, Apex," he roared. The room applauded. "Tonight, we honor one of our own. The Partner of the Year award is not just a trophy. It represents the future. It represents innovation. It represents the kind of disruptive thinking that will lead this company into the next decade." I sat at the table, my hands folded in my lap. I could feel Julian vibrating with anticipation next to me. "This year's recipient," Harrison continued, "is a man who has single-handedly redefined our client engagement strategy. His work in the Stanford sector," I nearly smiled, "was nothing short of revolutionary. He has secured the future of this company. Ladies and gentlemen, the Partner of the Year, the future of Apex Solutions. Mr. Julian Vance." The room erupted. The applause was deafening. A symphony played. Julian stood up, buttoned his jacket, and shot me a brilliant 1,000-watt smile. He kissed me, a quick, dry press on the lips, a gesture for the crowd. "Our moment, baby," he whispered. He walked up the steps, shaking Harrison's hand, accepting the heavy crystal award. He was, in that moment, a golden god. He turned to the audience, holding the trophy high. He waited for the applause to die down, which it did, slowly. He leaned into the microphone. "Wow," he said, breathing it in. I truly don't know what to say. This is incredible." He paused, looking down at the award. "I want to thank the people who believed in me. I want to thank Harrison, the board." From the back of the room, from the AV booth, there was a single, sharp click that no one but me would have noticed. Julian continued, "This award isn't just for me. It's for the team. It's for the hard work." Behind him, the massive 20-foot screen flickered. The blue Apex Solutions logo vanished. In its place, in stark white letters on a black background, a title appeared. "The Julian Vance Project, a Study in Deceit." A low murmur started at the tables in the back. Julian hadn't noticed. He was in his spotlight. "It's about a commitment to excellence," he said. The slide changed. The screen was now split in two. On the left, our wedding photo. Me in my white dress, Julian in his tuxedo, both of us young and stupidly happy. Cutting the cake. The caption read, "Eliza Vance, wife, status alive." On the right, the photo I had taken in the hospital. Julian, looking radiant and exhausted, holding the pink teddy bear and the peonies. But it was paired with another photo, one Chloe had given me Julian, in the Stanford apartment, holding Chloe and their newborn daughter, Lily. The caption, taken directly from one of his texts to her, read, "My new family, my real life." Julian's voice faltered. A commitment to... He must have felt the change in the room. The murmurs had stopped. It was a dead, tomb-like silence. He turned. He stared at the screen. He stared at his two lives, displayed for his entire world to see. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, sick, gray mask. He turned back to the microphone, his eyes wide with animal panic. There seems to be a... He tapped the microphone. "There's a technical... He tapped it again. Nothing. Marcus had cut his sound. He stood there, frozen in the spotlight, a golden god no more, just a man in a trap, opening and closing his mouth in silence as 500 people stared at the evidence of his betrayal. Then, from the shadows at the side of the stage, I walked out. I was holding a live microphone. I walked calmly to the center of the stage, my emerald dress shimmering. I stood a few feet away from him, the spotlight, sensing movement, widened to include me. I could see the sweat on his upper lip. I could see the absolute, profound terror in his eyes. I raised the microphone to my lips. My voice was calm, clear, and perfectly amplified, ringing through every speaker in the silent ballroom. "He's right," I said to the stunned crowd. "He really doesn't know what to say." So, as his wife, his living wife, I thought I'd say a few words instead. I turned, not to Julian, but to the 500 stunned faces in the audience. I used my lecture voice, the one I use at the Institute when presenting a new acquisition. Calm, measured, authoritative. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Julian Vance Project, A Study in Deceit. A presentation I've been working on for some time." Julian was still mouthing no into his dead microphone. Julian was right to thank his team. I continued. Marcus clicked to the next slide. Because he absolutely could not have achieved this award without them. The screen filled with documents, side by side. On the left, you will see the original data models and client engagement reports submitted by Marcus Thorne and two of his colleagues in the Chicago office, all time-stamped over a year ago. On the right, you will see Julian's Partner of the Year submission. As you can see, it's a near-perfect case of intellectual property theft. A collective gasp went through the room. I glanced at Harrison, the CEO. His face was no longer pale. It was a deep, furious red. He was staring at the data, his knuckles white on the tablecloth. "But this award wasn't just built on stolen ideas," I said, my voice hardening. "It was funded by stolen money." Marcus clicked again. The screen filled with bank statements. Here we see the fraudulent wire transfers, corporate funds, disguised as business development in Stamford a client. I've confirmed that Apex hasn't had in 2 years being funneled directly into these offshore accounts. The slide changed again. A high-resolution scan of the Lily Sanders Vance Trust document filled the screen. And he didn't just steal from his company. He stole from his mistress, Chloe Sanders, the mother of his newborn child. He took her entire life savings, over $30,000, using this forged trust document. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not just adultery. This is wire fraud. The silence in the room was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Julian, realizing the spotlight was no longer his, but was now an interrogation lamp, finally broke. He dropped the heavy crystal award. It hit the stage with a dull thud. He lunged for the side steps, heading for the exit. He didn't make it. 2 very large men in black suits. Hotel security stepped out from the curtains and grabbed him by both arms. He struggled, a pathetic, grunting noise coming from his throat. I looked past them. Robert McCain, the CFO, was standing in the wings, his arms crossed. He had returned. He nodded, just once, at the security guards. They tightened their grip, holding Julian fast. "Oh, Julian," I called out, my voice laced with pity. "You can't leave yet. We haven't gotten to the finale." I nodded at the booth. Marcus clicked one last time. And finally, his retirement plan. The screen showed the flight confirmation. One way to São Paulo, Brazil, departing tomorrow morning. "He was going to take your award, Mr. Harrison, take his stolen money, and disappear, leaving his company, his colleagues, his wife, and his mistress to clean up the mess." I let that sink in. The room was paralyzed. He seems to have forgotten a few things in his haste to pack. As if summoned by my words, the grand double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. A single figure, illuminated by the house lights, stood there. It was Chloe Sanders. She was in her nurse's scrubs, and she was pushing a baby stroller. She pushed it calmly, deliberately, down the center aisle. The click, click, click of her shoes was the only sound in the vast room. She stopped at the foot of the stage, looking up at the man being held by security. "You forgot something, Julian," Chloe called out, her voice strong and clear. From my table, my mother, Beatrice, stood up. She raised her glass of champagne high, a magnificent, theatrical gesture. "Bravo!" she shouted into the silence. "A truly magnificent performance. Darling." Julian was hyperventilating now, twisting in the guard's grip. Harrison, the CEO, his face a mask of cold fury, strode across the stage. He took the live microphone from my hand. "Julian Vance," he boomed, his voice shaking with rage. "You are fired." Julian spat. You can't prove." "We can," Harrison said. "As of 10 minutes ago, the Apex legal team, working with Mr. McCain, verified the contents of this." He held up the tiny USB drive I had given the CFO. "And as of 5 minutes ago, they contacted the authorities." The ballroom doors opened again. This time, it wasn't a woman with a stroller. It was 2 uniformed police officers. They walked directly to the stage. "Julian Vance," the officer said, "you are under arrest for fraud and embezzlement." They took him from the security guards, pulled his arms behind his back, and cuffed him. Right there, on the stage, in his tuxedo, under the spotlight of his greatest triumph, I watched them lead him away. I looked across the room and met Chloe's eyes. I gave her a single, slow nod. We did it. I stepped down from the stage, the adrenaline finally leaving me. I walked back to my table. My mother was waiting, her coat draped over her arm. She looped her arm through mine. "I'm thinking," Beatrice whispered, pulling me toward the exit as the ballroom erupted into chaos behind us. "We should go somewhere that has a much, much better dessert menu." I took one last look back at the stage at the discarded award, the panicked executives, the empty space where my husband used to be. Then I turned, and I didn't look back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I'd love to connect and share our thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us that extra support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by many more people.